Welcome to another episode of Practically Political. I'm Dave Spencer.
And I'm Carrie Sheffield. It's great to have you all.
And we are thrilled today to have the chief strategist from No Labels, Ryan Clancy, with us. I wrote a piece recently raising concerns about No Labels in their third-party efforts in terms of the effects that it might have on the election and helping Trump win. So I thought, what better thing to do than have Ryan come in, which he's kindly agreed to do, to be on our show and to give us an idea of what's going on. So what I thought we'd do, Ryan, is if you can just explain to us about your strategy with your so-called Unity ticket and what the idea is, how you plan to get the number of electoral votes, 270 that one needs to win, and just any other comments you have, and then we'll get into questions. So great to have you here, Ryan. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, well, thank you both for having me. And look, both of you know the history of No Labels. I know you've followed us over the years. And, you know, for the first decade of our existence, and we got started in 2009, people knew us as the group that helped start the House Problem Solvers Caucus. Did a lot of great work in Congress to get bipartisan legislation over the finish line. And that's our reason for being. We're trying to speak for the common sense majority in this country, to try to get Washington to govern. And to the extent anything good has happened in Washington these last couple of years, whether you're talking about the bipartisan infrastructure bill or the CHIPS Act, the semiconductor bill, very much has been our allies in the middle of that. And we're very proud of it. But as you noted at the top, Dave, we have been working for over the course of a year to get ballot access for 2024, to potentially tee up the possibility to offer our ballot line for an independent Unity ticket. Now, why would we be doing this? And the short answer is because we think it's so clearly something that the public wants. You look at poll after poll, over 2/3 of people do not want the election both major parties are likely to give us. You look at the issues in the way we talk about them, and it is so obvious that these days, most people in Washington or most candidates either don't talk about issues a lot of Americans care about, or they do talk about them, but not in the way most people think about it. And that's why we were up in New Hampshire earlier this week to release our common sense policy booklet. So we have a long way to go. One of the stories that has definitely not got out there enough, despite our efforts to say it repeatedly every time we say this, talk about this publicly, is we may never offer up a ticket. And I can't emphasize that enough. And that's what distinguishes us in a lot of ways from Cornel West or somebody else like that, who they're running no matter what. We are only going to offer up our ballot line if we think, one, the two major party candidates are weak enough in the view of the public, and two, if we think there's an outright chance for a ticket like this to win. In the absence of that, we will not put up a ticket. And we don't have to make that decision for 6 to 9 months from now until early next year. But the key point is you can't ever do that unless you do the work now to get ballot access, because that's the hard part. And that is often the stumbling block that prevents an alternative from emerging. So that's why we've been at this since early last year.
And so, Ryan, when you say so I guess the contingency, if I'm hearing this correctly, is if it's a weak candidate on both sides, define that for us. Who is weak from the perspective of No Labels that would justify taking this action?
Sure. Well, it's not us. It's what the public thinks. And importantly, it's what the public thinks 6 to 9 months from now, based on some pretty rigorous polling we've done. So we have, the last big poll we did was of 26,000 registered voters. And as you know, I mean, that's a huge sample size. If you read a Wall Street Journal poll, that's 2,000 people. 59% of people said they'd be open to voting for a moderate independent ticket if the choices were Trump and Biden. Now, look, people saying they're open to voting for a ticket doesn't mean they're going to do it. But when you see the ceiling that high, that speaks to us the appetite people clearly have for something different from what they're getting. So I don't think it should surprise people. The one thing almost everybody agrees on, it's not just our polling, nobody wants the election we're probably getting. It's the one universal point of agreement. Why should it surprise people that there is therefore an unusually high degree of openness to something different?
Well, I guess My main question is, because you folks are talking about wanting to raise about $70 million, right, to pull this off. Is that correct? And so
Yes.
you're going to set up the infrastructure. And I guess where I struggle with this is, first of all, if you go through these motions and you get people to support giving all this money, and then you have everything set up and you say, oh, never mind, that kind of goes against human nature, because people have given money, they want to get something for that money. And the second thing is, you've said that you will not do anything to risk another Trump presidency, and that's what No Labels has said. But
Yes.
where is the breaking point? What criteria, or what's your primary criterion that you're going to say, you know what, this is too much of a risk to help Donald Trump win? Because the reason I ask that is because, yes, you're right, over 70% of voters don't want either candidate. But when you look at voters who don't like either candidate, Biden overwhelmingly wins those. And that's the risk in many people's eyes, is that you're going to pull more votes away. So can you address those two issues?
Sure. So that first question, Dave, is a really important one, because I'm sure that's other people have, which they think to themselves, look, you all are spending a lot of time and resources to get this ballot access, to do all this work. That inertia could take over, and you talk yourself into doing this 6 to 9 months from now. Here's why that's not going to happen. Because remember, Dave, we have been at this for a decade. And fundamentally, we are in the business of movement building. We are trying to get a set of ideas that this common sense majority can finally start to rally around and finally start to push back on the loudest and angriest voices that dominate our politics. And so if 6 to 9 months from now, we've done all this effort and we determine it's not worth the risk, and or we don't see a path to victory, but we walk away with the ideas we know the public cares about, both party nominees feel like they have to pay attention to it. Our movement is bigger. We've got more influence. And finally, the common sense majority has a seat at the table, then that's money well spent. And we're okay.
But how do you know when to walk away? That's what I'm not hearing, and I haven't heard from anybody on your team.
So the decision point, Dave, will come somewhere between Super Tuesday, which is when we're likely to know and that's early March, when we're likely to know who the major party nominees are. And then our convention, which we're going to have in Dallas in mid-April 2024. Now, if there's a ticket, that convention will be the coming out party for that ticket, just like a party convention. If there is no ticket, we're still having the convention, but it'll be the place where all the governors and House and Senate members and other leaders who really align with our movement, and it'll just be a chance for No Labels to shine a spotlight on the really critical work that we're doing.
Wow. So Ryan, those are very specific dates.
Where's the how?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So how will we decide? So there's two things, Dave, that I said we did a huge poll in December of 2022. We're going to be doing another big one after Labor Day. And there's going to be two things that we're looking at, which is one, the viability of the ticket and people's openness to it. But number two, where do the votes come from? Now, our data is telling a different story than some of the other data you've seen out there that suggests a No Labels ticket would inevitably pull disproportionately from Biden instead of Trump. When we did our poll, it showed a moderate independent pulling evenly from both sides. One of the comparisons that has been made, which really has absolutely no relevance to what we're doing, is you will hear people say, but Ralph Nader ruined it for Al Gore in 2000, and Jill Stein ruined it for Hillary Clinton in 2016. And people are probably right about that. Here's what they're wrong about, though. A No Labels ticket would never look like that. Ralph Nader and Jill Stein were left-wing protest candidates. So the only votes they were ever going to pull were votes that otherwise would have went to the Democrat. And in fact, in this cycle, there's a candidate that looks like that, and his name is Cornel West. And his campaign manager is Jill Stein, by the way. So if he goes all the way, he gets on the ballot for the Green Party, he is going to pull votes that would otherwise go to the Democrat. One of the things we really looked closely at was, we'd argue the last time a independent ran to the vast middle of the electorate was Perot in 1992. And there was a bunch of exit polling that was done. NBC did the biggest that we could find. And they asked Perot voters, if Perot hadn't been in the race, who would you have voted for? 38% said Bush, 38% said Clinton, and 24% said, I wouldn't have voted at all. And that's just about what our poll found. Now, Dave, one last point. Of course, in the end, the identity of the ticket matters more than anything else. So I'm sure we can imagine combinations, because remember, we're talking about a Democrat and a Republican on the ticket. Okay, who's on the top of the ticket? What is the profile of that person on the top of the ticket? I'm sure we can all imagine different combinations that would pull more from one side or the other, or pour both from the middle. That'll be an important consideration for us. Not only do we not want to run or nominate a ticket that we don't think can win, we don't want to nominate a ticket that whatever votes they do get is built disproportionately by pulling votes out of one side.